Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our conversations as we are now working through Gibran's The Prophet. We're doing 30 of these talks. We are now in lecture number 6, the little poem on giving. And I have to tell you guys that everyone that reads and spends much time with Gibran's Prophet will like to focus or hone in on different poems, and they're precious to them for any number of reasons. This passage has been the source of a whole lot of folks that just say, man, this is amazing stuff. What's interesting is that Al-Mustafa the Prophet is going to now expand and build on some of the ideas that have come before. And I love the way that Gibran will, through Al-Mustafa, will look towards by looking away. For example, think of it. So he says he's going to talk about children, but he actually spends most of the time talking about parenting. Have you noticed this? So for example, here, he's going to spend time talking about, he's going to say he's talking about giving, but he actually is going to spend just as much time, or maybe more, talking about receiving. In other words, he's always reminding us of the two sides of reality, and obviously, he's going to always take this more spiritual bent, philosophic, spiritual bent. Here, for example, we're going to think a lot about the power of gratitude in this passage. Now, our assumptions that you've been following our stuff at lunchstrong.net down that left-hand side to find our playlist. I've given a set of introductory comments that I'm hopeful that you're with, and I'm hopeful that you've been working all the way up through, as we just said, on children. I want you in this passage to notice, and all the way through now the readings of all these poems, his use of the word joy. I want you to pay attention to that. I as well, I want to remind you in the biography that Mary Haskell's, his pal, she supported him quite a bit. So when he talks about receiving, he knows exactly what he's talking about. By the way, at his death, she actually received quite a bit of his stuff, of his possessions, and ultimately, she's the one that helped set up the museum in the town of his birth in Basar that will be an old monastery that's turned into this amazing museum, and she had a lot to do with that. So when we read him talk about receiving, we'll understand he did receive quite a bit from her. We, interestingly, will begin with a rich man. Notice it's not a poor man talks about giving, it's a rich man. Then said a rich man, "Speak to us of giving." That is to say, the man who has means asks, what about giving? And it's pretty clear that standing behind all these little first line or one line introductions, we're supposed to read beneath the epidermis, and we go, okay, so here's a guy who has wealth, and here's a guy who has been giving away probably quite a bit of that wealth, and yet he probably wants to know, am I doing it correctly, this giving thing? Now the response, of course, from Al-Mustafa. He answered, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It's when you give of yourself that you truly give. For what are your possessions but things you keep and guard for fear you may need them tomorrow? And tomorrow, what shall tomorrow bring to the overprudent dog burying bones in the trackless sand as he follows the pilgrims to the holy city?" I love this this word picture, right? In other words, people who hoard are like the dog who likes to bury the bone. And we can see that word picture so well. Of course, think about the power of the word tomorrow. And Gibran knew, of course, this Macbeth 5:5, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its petty pace. Now, much of this is going to have a text standing behind it, so we should say it out loud. It is that interesting passage in the biblical corpus of Acts 20:35, "It's more blessed to give than to receive," a line that is attributed to Christ, although in the gospel accounts he never actually said specifically those words. So notice, the argument here is that when you give, you have to give of yourself. The possessions are not. The stuff that you give is not what matters. This is, of course, the extension of that idea that, it's the thought that counts when gifts are given and the like. Notice he'll say it. And what is fear of need but need itself? Now, we're going to find these lines all the way through the prophet, which is one of the reasons why it's such a beloved text. Think about that line. What is fear of need but need itself? Is not dread of thirst when your well is full the thirst that is unquenchable? I mean, it's amazing to me the way a line like that can just produce a sudden epiphany. The light bulb comes on, and if you spend all of your time trying to constantly think about how it's possible you could lose your wealth, for example, or your health, for example, or those you love, for example, in what ways have you already lost those things? You're somehow deprived of the freedom to enjoy those things. This is his view. And then he says it this way. There are those, and I love how he does this, where he kind of sets up in other words, he doesn't point the finger directly at any of us and say, yeah, what's wrong with you? He says it this way. There are those who give little of the much which they have, and they give it for recognition, and their hidden desire makes their gifts unwholesome. Now, we in 303 love that passage from the Bhagavad Gita to you have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of your labor. Desire for the fruits must never be your motive in working. Never give way to laziness either. You'll remember how that passage is. And I think there's a lot of that going on here as well. If you give so that people will clap and be kind of happy and they want to celebrate you, this idea of recognition, and if this is the hidden desire behind your giving, he says that the gifts are, and then he uses this interesting word, unwholesome. In other words, there's something toxic, there's something pathological, there's something, he might even argue, dangerous about giving so that you can somehow be known and there can be recognition of your gift. And he says, again, notice the construction, there are those who have little and give it all. Now, this is an interesting reference, an allusion to the, I think, biblical story, the gospel story in Mark 12:42, as well as Luke 21, the first 4 verses, of the widow with 2 mites, where Christ is watching this woman give, and she has nothing, and the only thing she has, she gives away. And this is, I think, part of it. But then he goes to a third. There are, he says it, these are the believers in life and the bounty of life, and their coffer is never empty. This is to say, spiritual giving. Then he goes on to 3. There are those who give with joy. Notice his use of this word. And joy is their reward. In other words, I think this is the Gita 2 passage we were just working with. And there are those who give with pain, and that pain is their baptism. And this will take us back, of course, to his passage on children, that, of course, sometimes letting one's children go is painful, no question. And, notice just this continuation, there are those who give and know not pain in giving, nor do they seek joy, nor give with mindfulness of virtue. In other words, no agenda whatsoever. They give. As in yonder valley, the myrtle breathes its fragrance into space. In other words, in nature, flowers, trees, they give off whatever it is they give off, whether it be fruit, whether it be fragrance, and there is nothing that they expect in return. We're going to come back to this image in a moment. Through the hands of such as these, God speaks, and from behind their eyes, he smiles upon the earth. In other words, back to the idea of nature, the romanticism that is Gibran, of always drawing from symbols like Ruthie's tree. In other words, in nature, trees and flowers will give without any expectation of return, and no reason of personal interest to give either. It is, shall we say it, in their nature. And now he continues. It is well to give when asked, but it's better to give unasked, through understanding. Look at the pain of the world, Gibran will say, through Alma's stuff. Look at the pain of the world. Identify who needs something, and then just give that. If you see someone, for example, who is in need, identify their need, and then appropriate whatever you can. And it doesn't have to be possessions. It might, for example, be a kind word that would be the gift. And to the open-handed, the search for one who shall receive is joy greater than giving. Now, this is an interesting shift. In other words, there's the giver, there's the receiver, and the giver loves to be able to give to one who is able to receive with joy. And is there aught you would withhold? In other words, possessions. He continues, all you have shall someday be given. It's a beautiful insight, right? As we've said, you can only swing at the park for a few minutes. We'll call that your life. And then, as the Scrooge story reminds us, you have to go bye-bye. The van is always waiting. I want to go to the van, the child will say. No, honey, you can't swing at the park forever. You got to go to the van. Let's go. This was what was being taught to us as children. We have to hold on to that. Whatever it is that you're hoarding, whatever that is, it's all got to go. Why? Because you haven't met any 200-year-old people. Everything goes. The transitory nature of our lives and our possessions will inform us that all you have someday shall be given. Therefore, give now, the immediacy, notice, that the season of giving may be yours and not your inheritors. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about this. That is to say, what's the best way, for example, to parents to pass on their wealth to their children or whatever, to do it while they're still alive, or, of course, to do it through some form of a will. Here he says, learn how to give now, to be in the present moment. Don't say, I will give later. Give now of whatever it is that you are giving, and enjoy the experience of releasing what is never really ours in the end anyway, because again, it's all going to be given back, or we got to let it all go, because of course we all have to go to the van. I love the next construction. He'll say it this way, you often say, but it's not like he's pointing. He's saying, people often say, and notice the use of the word often. I would give, but only to the deserving. We've all, of course, thought this on some level. We've all felt this on some level. We've obviously witnessed those who say this. It's not that I'm against giving. I just want to make sure that I'm giving it to people who understand how to respect my gift, how to use the gift that I'm giving and the like. Of course, we as teachers will often, I'll just confide to you guys, we often as teachers will struggle with this idea. I'll spend time with students, but only if they, for example, demonstrate to me their willingness to appreciate my time, my energy given to them. And now we'll go to, again, the trees. And I love this word picture, and many do as well, because the trees, especially the fruit-bearing trees, will immediately come to mind. Look how he says it. The trees in your orchard, say not so, nor the flocks in your pasture, right? Notice, he'll give these word pictures from just real life stuff. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish. In other words, if an apple tree doesn't produce apples, it dies. But when the apple tree drops apples and someone picks the apple up to eat it, it's like the apple tree says, hey, I'm not gonna let you eat that unless you give me the proper gratitude. No. Nature will provide without any sense of a need for, gratitude. Surely, he says it this way, surely he who is worthy to receive his days and his nights is worthy of all else from you, right? That is to say, there should be no rules, he says, other than you have the opportunity to give. And he who has deserved to drink from the ocean of life deserves to fill his cup from your little stream. I mean, it's like Gibran every once in a while writes a line that any of us as writers would say, if I could just write one of these lines in my life, that would be enough. And he just comes back to it again and again and again. In other words, what? We get to decide who deserves whatever it is that we're going to give? No. He says that's silliness. And what desert greater shall there be than that which lies in the courage and the confidence, nay, the charity of receiving? Now, this is one of the reasons that we will qualify Gibran as brilliant, as genius, because he's constantly playing these games that will lead to a certain kind of perception or perspicacity that will blow our mind. Notice here, he says, there is charity in giving, but there's also charity in receiving. Knowing how to receive a gift, knowing how to recognize that you are being shown kindness, right? You'll remember in Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey that he will say that the mark of a great life is that what? Little nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love. You'll remember. We've given full lecture at learnstrong.net on that classic poem. But here we're saying something quite similar as well. In other words, there is something powerful about learning how to witness or recognize or accept all the gifts that have been given to you in this very day. Somebody made a meal for you. Somebody has helped you in so many ways to do things. And for most of those, we just don't recognize them when we need to learn to. And who are you? It's wonderful. And who are you that men should rend their bosom and unveil their pride, that you may see their worth naked in their pride unabashed? Whoa! In other words, why is it that others must demonstrate their competency, their eagerness to receive your gift? Why should they have to do that? No, he says that's silliness. And then he goes to perspicacity, insight, right? See first that you yourself deserve to be a giver and an instrument of giving. Earn the right to be a giver, and then enjoy the opportunity of being a receiver. For, he says it this way to finish, in truth, it is life that gives unto life, while you, who deem yourself a giver, are but a witness. In other words, it is this symbiotic nature of life, the giving, the receiving. Somebody, guys, can we say it this way? Somebody had to take care of you in the first year of your life, and you would die without that help. And you receivers, and you are all receivers, so you love it. Assume no weight of gratitude, lest you lay a yoke upon yourself and upon he who gives. This weight of gratitude, it should be joy of gratitude, not a weight. In other words, if somebody does something for me, I have to do something back, which is why I want nobody doing anything for me. Gibran will say that's silliness. Rather, rise together, there's unity, with the giver on his gifts as on wings. Of course, the simile is beautiful. Flight, right? Freedom. For to be over-mindful of your debt is to doubt his generosity, who has the free-hearted earth for mother and God for father. In other words, the goal is to learn how to give as well as to receive, and that's obviously our 2A message, right? At 2B, I love again how he will expand on topics, from children to parents, from giving to receiving. And I love the power of the word picture of the tree and its fruit. Of course, in 3A, well, we mentioned a number of titles. I like the idea of the Dickens Christmas Carol and what Scrooge learns about giving and about receiving. Isn't it fascinating that at the moment he sees his tombstone, he's ready to fall down and beg for one more day. And the moment he's given that one more day, what does he do? Well, immediately he's ready to start giving. Isn't that fascinating? He's ready to start recognizing that in giving, he's going to receive. Finally, in 3B, to own a poem like this, what's a time that you loved giving, and what was a time that may be more difficult for you guys to think about? A time you loved receiving, and you were aware of that. From here, we'll now move to eating and drinking, which is a wonderful transition. I hope you're enjoying the challenge of this text. Thank you.